Nick Foles sucks, but he's also great, but he's also just okay. Who the hell is this guy anyway? Well, he's the weirdest NFL quarterback I've ever seen. The only way to understand the strange existence of Nick Foles is to start from the beginning. A third-round pick in what would end up as one of the greatest quarterback classes in draft history, Foles was drafted to serve as a backup to Michael Vick and did so until Week 10, when Vick suffered a concussion against the Cowboys. He had a decent debut off the bench, but he lost a game-ending fumble on the tying drive. The Eagles would lose 38-23. Foles' second start didn't go much better. In fact, it was worse. But with head coach Andy Reid's time running out in Philly, he made Foles the starter for the rest of the season, Vick recovered or not. Against the Buccaneers, his game-winning touchdown to Jeremy Maclin proved to be the first win of his career and the last for Reid as Eagles head coach. A broken hand against Washington sidelined him and his rookie season was over. But that's not the Nick Foles story you want, is it? No. This is. Fast forward to 2013, Chip Kelly is now the Eagles' head coach, and Vick went back to being the starter despite Foles putting up a competitive camp. But in Week 5, thanks to a pulled hammy, Foles would get his chance again, responding with another quality performance off the bench against the Giants. With 197 yards and 2 touchdowns on 25 attempts, he was able to rally the Eagles to a convincing 36-21 victory. Against the Buccaneers, Foles saw even greater success, just barely missing 300 passing yards while throwing for 4 touchdowns, good enough to give him the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. Foles' brief success ended briefly, as he struggled against the Cowboys and suffered a head injury in the same game, keeping him out of the second Giants matchup. Vick returned for that game, but ended up aggravating his hamstring, allowing Foles to start the following week against the Raiders. What Foles pulled off in that game was bullshit. The 3-5 Eagles found life immediately, and Foles took the league by storm with 406 yards on 28 attempts, 7 touchdowns, and no interceptions. His 14.5 yards per attempt are the second most from an Eagle quarterback in a single game post-merger. He also became one of 7 quarterbacks to throw 7 touchdowns in a single game, and one of 3 to do it without a single pick. To cap it all off, Foles is the only QB of the 7-touchdown club with a perfect passer rating. After that blowout victory, Foles continued his dominance against the Packers. Then, despite throwing for 0 touchdowns, moved the chains consistently against Washington, one which ended a 10-game losing streak at home. For his efforts in that 3-game winning streak, Foles was named NFC Player of the Month. His 152.8 passer rating remains the highest in a single November in NFL history. Foles' hot streak would continue in December, where the Eagles would win 3 of their next 4 games to set up an NFC East deciding showdown in Arlington against the Cowboys. Foles was up to the occasion, throwing for 263 yards on 26 attempts and a pair of touchdowns in the 24-22 playoff clinching victory. Since Foles took over for good against the Raiders, no team had scored more points between Week 9 and Week 17 in 2013. At the end of the regular season, Foles put up the third highest passer rating in a season at the time, and finished inside the top 25 in yards per attempt. He led all of 2013 in yards per attempt, passer rating, touchdown percentage, and yards per completion. Regarding touchdowns, which Foles had 27 of, he put together the best touchdown-interception ratio in the history of football at the time. Astonishing for a game's history that includes guys like Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. What's more astonishing is this list. This is a list of QBs with more than 25 touchdowns and less than 5 interceptions in a single season. It's only happened 5 times, one of which was done by Nick Foles. Look at this man. The other 3 quarterbacks to achieve this goal are 3 of the greatest quarterbacks we will ever see. And then there's Nick Foles just sitting there not giving a shit. Football is beautiful sometimes, isn't it? Philly's playoff run was brief as they lost a heartbreaker at home to the Saints 24-22. Foles threw a go-ahead touchdown late in the game, but New Orleans rallied and escaped Philadelphia with a last-second field goal as time expired to advance. Definitely not the ending the team wanted, but the Eagles seemed to have found their franchise quarterback in Foles, set to establish himself as potentially one of the game's elite QBs. Or he could just regress and fall back to earth like a bag of bricks. That's okay too, I guess. The Eagles started the season 2-0, but something was wrong with Foles. He was playing poorly in the first half of both games, equaling his interception total from all of 2013. The Eagles' offense was good enough, even without Deshaun Jackson, who was cut for some reason, to come back from multiple possessions and win each of these games. Foles would also rebound against Washington in Week 3, putting the Eagles at 3-0. Then reality hit. A brutal performance against the 49ers resulted in the team's first loss on the year. Then Foles improved to mediocrity in wins against the Rams and Giants. Against the Cardinals, Foles threw for over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, but also on 62 attempts with 2 interceptions. The Eagles lost 24-20. The next game, Foles injured his collarbone against the Texans, ending a disappointing season. Though he'd end up throwing for more yards per game, this came at the cost of a far lower touchdown percentage and passer rating. Foles would not get another chance to keep his starting role, as he was traded to the Rams in the offseason. The trade made sense. If any quarterback was going to play for Jeff Fisher, it was Nick Foles. His debut as the Rams starting QB could not have come against a more intimidating opponent. The Seahawks were home to the league's #1 defense in points allowed in each of the previous 2 seasons. The game went exactly as you would expect. The Rams won! I'm clearly drinking too much, or maybe not drinking enough, because what the fuck? This happened. This happened. Foles threw just shy of 300 yards on 27 attempts, adding a passing and rushing touchdown to the mix as the Rams upset the Seahawks in overtime by a score of 34-31. Perhaps this was a new beginning for Foles, who had found his 2013 magic once more. Maybe the Rams were right to bring his talents to St. Louis. Or he'd just regress back to the hells of mediocrity against Washington the following week. Outside of a 3-touchdown performance in an upset against the undefeated Cardinals, Foles, what are you doing? What the fuck? Foles was playing shitty football, which included a 4-interception performance against the Packers in Week 5. Foles was playing so underwhelmingly bad that he was eventually benched for Case Keenum. Then came back, then sucked so much that he was benched for Keenum again. After requesting his release following the season's conclusion, Foles' request was accepted. He briefly contemplated retirement, but ultimately decided to reunite with Andy Reid, signing a 1-year contract with the Chiefs to play as Alex Smith's backup. Much like in Philly, Foles thrived off the bench when Smith was knocked out in Week 8 against the Colts due to concussion symptoms. With 223 yards on 22 attempts and a pair of touchdowns, he guided the Chiefs to a dominant 30-14 victory. The following week, Foles made his only start of the season, doing just enough to avoid mistakes as KC won against the Jaguars 19-14. That would be Foles' last game of action in the Chiefs uniform, and in 2017, he'd had to find another new team. And when free agency hit, he found a new team. The Eagles! Yep. After getting traded by the very same team that drafted him, Foles signed as a backup to Carson Wentz and made his return to that same team. Then, in the middle of a season where he was putting up MVP caliber numbers, Wentz tore his ACL late against the Rams in Week 14. Once again, it was time for Foles to make his presence felt in Philly. He made several clutch throws to seal a division-clinching win, putting the Eagles back in the playoffs for the first time since 2013, when Foles was the starter. But what good was it? The star quarterback was out. The franchise leader was gone. A sensational performance against the Giants followed the next week. Then a not-so-good performance against the Raiders in the game the Eagles still won. Foles would see limited action in the regular season finale so that he could rest for the playoffs. Eventually, the Eagles would meet the defending NFC champion Falcons, who took down the #1 scoring offense in the Rams the week prior. Facing a streaky backup, Atlanta looked to take control and head back to the NFC Championship. Foles struggled throughout, including on this interception to Keanu. Oh my god, what the fuck did you just do? Neil, what the fuck did you just do? What just happened? What just fucking happened? What? Was that real? There was no way a quarterback could get... No. No one just punts an interception back to the offense. That can't happen. That throw was fucking terrible. Act of Satan aside, that drive led to a field goal that cut Philly's deficit to 10-9. This was followed by 2 more field goals, which put the Eagles up 15-10. As the Falcons drove to the goal line late in the game, the offense forgot how to call plays, and Philadelphia escaped with a thrilling victory that catapulted them to their first conference title game since 2008. This time, Foles was set to face the #1 defense in the Vikings, and an offense quarterbacked by his old Rams teammate, Case Keenum. Minnesota was a team of destiny, and even on the road, they were set to thrash the Eagles. As expected, Foles threw for 352 yards on 33 attempts, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions as the Eagles kicked the absolute dog shit out of an exhausted Vikings team to the tune of 38-7, catapulting the Eagles to their first Super Bowl in 13 years, where they would once again face the Patriots, quarterbacked by the 27 MVP himself, Tom Brady. There was no way the Eagles without Wentz could You know what? You know what happened. Forget it. You know what happened. Foles passed for 373 yards on 43 attempts, 3 touchdowns, and just 1 interception, while becoming the 3rd quarterback to catch a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Even more unbelievable, he was the first to catch a touchdown and win his Super Bowl. This is what the gods demanded. Go blame them, not me. This performance would deliver the Eagles their very first Super Bowl, and Foles was named the game's MVP. When I first watched this, I had no idea what was going on. Did you? I didn't. Somehow, a quarterback that came out on top in his second season, just to crumble and get exiled, came back to the team who drafted him as a backup, got sprung into action, and ended up being the hero that earned a city its first Super Bowl. It didn't make sense. But did we need it to? No. No, we did not. Fast forward to 2018, with Carson Wentz's recovery keeping him out of the first two games, Foles started in the first two matchups. The season opener against the Falcons ended in similar fashion to the divisional round victory, with Foles reverting back into, Nick Foles. The team split their first two games, and with Wentz starting week 3, Big Dick Nick returned to his role as backup. That is until week 15, when Wentz suffered a back injury that kept him out of the rest of the season. That year's Eagle team regressed big time with a 6-7 record through 13 games. This was where Foles answered the bat signal and became Big Dick Nick once more. A win against the Rams was followed by a 4-touchdown performance and a win against the Texans, and a good enough performance against Washington in a 24-0 shutout victory that earned the Eagles a wild card spot after the Vikings would help Philadelphia out with another loss in a very important game. In the wild card, Foles faced the NFC North champion Bears, who had the league's best defense in 2018. So, of course, he throws the game-winning touchdown late in the fourth quarter and advances because of the double doink missed field goal. Yeah. This is not normal. Nick Foles, may I remind you, was exiled from the Eagles after 2014, an era where he had no playoff wins and 1 appearance. And here he is with 4 playoff wins with the Eagles. Can I explain it? No. Do I want to? Yes, but also no. But what is it? I don't know, but it's fun. Unfortunately, the divisional round ended in another heartbreaking loss to the Saints. This time, Foles threw an accurate enough pass on a potential game-winning drive that fell through the hands of Alshon Jeffrey like the transparent object it was. And the dream run was over. This time, for good, it would be Foles' last game as an Eagle. And this time, he left on a much more legendary note. In terms of the city's greatest athletes, Foles should be nowhere near the top. No. In terms of Philly sports legends, however, he's in the conversation. Here's a depressing fact, or maybe it's uplifting, you never know. Foles has the Eagles' record for passer rating. Yes, higher than Randall Cunningham, Donovan McNabb, Michael Vick, and higher than Carson Wentz. In the playoffs, Foles started off with 4 consecutive games with a 100 passer rating or higher. His 98.8 passer rating is the 7th highest in playoff history. That makes perfect sense. For some reason, the Jaguars saw that Foles was only good in Philadelphia and decided to give him $50 million guaranteed in an $88 million deal. But in week 1 against the red-hot Chiefs, Foles threw this absolute dime under intense pressure to DJ Chark for 35 yards. This play is mentioned because it was Foles' last pass attempt before he suffered another collarbone injury. Foles would have to wait until week 11 to reclaim his job, and responded with 296 yards on 47 attempts, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception in a thrilling 33-13 blowout loss to the Colts. The Jaguars would get the absolute shit beat out of them in the next 2 weeks, and Foles was benched for Gardner Minshew afterwards. That's why you pay him $50 million to bench him. Somehow, someway, the Jaguars found a trade partner in the following off-season. Yeah, the Bears. Chicago, this is not helping the narrative that you've never had a quarterback. What are you doing this for? Even though the Bears front office claimed fourth-year starter Mitchell Trubisky would stay in that role, we all knew better. You don't trade for a quarterback just so he can ride the bench all season. And in week 3, Trubisky was benched for Foles. I want you to take a guess as to who the opponent was in this game. Just take a guess. Yep, the Falcons. The team Foles loves swallowing the souls out of the most. Foles' vintage magical bullshit was on full display against Atlanta, as this pass was somehow caught by a Bears receiver, and he threw this game-winning touchdown, which was amazing, to Anthony Miller to cap off a thrilling 16-point comeback victory. Foles off the bench threw 3 touchdowns and a pick with 188 yards on 29 attempts. Speaking of which, Foles' passer rating off the bench is the second highest from any quarterback ever, just behind Steve Young. Do with that info what you will, but Nick Foles off the bench is like Eli Manning in the Super Bowl. You're going to see the greatest quarterback of all time. That was basically the high point of Foles' season, as he was mostly brutal the rest of the way. Then they finished 8-8, somehow making the playoffs because of how trash the NFC was that year. At that point, Foles suffered a hip injury in week 10, and Trubisky got his starting job back. And this is where the story of Nick Foles ends. For now, anyway. Will we see him bullshit his way into a great performance off the bench? Who's to really say? Based on how Big Dick Nick rolls, I'd expect to see that at least one more time. But he's the weirdest quarterback I've ever seen, and I celebrate him for that. It seems like he's only good with the Eagles, and even then he still sucks. But then, he'll come around from time to time with the craziest luck you'll ever see from any QB, just to regress immediately. I don't get it. You get elite performances, terrible performances, and performances where you just go, meh. That is the Nick Foles experience. His skill set is very boring, but his career in hindsight is extremely fascinating. There are good trips and bad trips, all mixed into one taste of acid. Just make sure you proceed with caution.